code on this computer. Perfect. Awesome. So let's know a little bit about Linda. I got to know Linda from LinkedIn. Linda is a sought-after management consultant, speaker, and thought leader in business analysis and business architecture with over 20 years of experience in both IT and business projects. She was also the chairperson of the IBA Adelaide branch and a national board member of the IBA Australian chapter. There are so many labels on you, Linda. So my first question is, how do you want to describe yourself?
Oh, I guess everybody wears many hats, right? So, from a professional point of view, you've got a lot of this.
Yeah, it got stuck a bit, I think.
Stuff in there, we'll do management. You do whatever needs to be done on a project, right? Testing and things like that. Mm-hmm. I guess that's from a professional point of view, but the things that I'm proud of is that, I'm a mom of two really great adult children who are making some great life choices, who I'm quite close to. I've survived them learning how to drive. I'm very proud of that. I've got 3 dogs who I love to bits. I've got a fabulous husband that I've known for over 25 years, and some great friends in New Zealand and in Australia and around the world. I'm originally from Canada, so if you hear a funny accent, it's not the Australian accent. But I've lived most of my life in Australia, and I love Australia. I think it's a great country. And New Zealand is second to none. I've got my bestest friends who live down in Dunedin. And, I go there whenever I can. So yeah, it's a fantastic country. And I'm really happy to be here. I love teaching, coaching, nurturing BAs. I had in one company that I worked for, they used to call me Mama BA. Mama BA. Wow. Yeah. And, and like a mother hen, having her little BAs under her wings. And, I love seeing people grow and flourish in their careers and learning and growing. And it's one of the things I love about business analysis is that it's technology is always changing, and people are growing and understanding, business and digital transformation and the importance now of data and cyber. But just in terms of not so much the sexiness of a project or whatever, because that changes, and some digital projects never go out, but just the outcomes that you actually provide clients that are long-lasting benefits, whether it's not, I did at New South Wales Cancer Institute, and very simple business process improvement of having an appointment reminder, which, the project took a ridiculous 6 weeks just to get an SMS to be actually generated from the booking system, which was crazy at the time. But the real benefits of that was, a 60% decrease in no-shows. Now, that is something that is, from a point of view from the client side, is that, so it's less inconvenience for them and for their professionals, but longer term health benefits, there's 60% more women who went in and actually got a mammogram. Do you know what I mean? So just from a simple SMS reminder that you just, instigated as a continuous improvement as part of your investigation of a project. And to me,
yeah, I think she got stuck. Let's just wait for it to be back.
As a BA, those are the yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Linda. I really resonate with your point that sometimes what we do can actually have a profound impact on people's life and also change the organization so much. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why we want to be a BA. And let's actually lead to my next question. I think you've answered partly, but we would love to know why and how did you become a business analyst from the travel agent in the first place? And when was that?
Where is that? Okay, well, it's a long time ago. When I was studying in college, I thought I wanted to go into journalism or sociology, and become a social worker and help kids. after studying for a number of years psychology, and how much books I had to read and how much I tried to remember, I was really not enjoying myself. And it was just a very random commercial that came on TV for a college advertising tourism. And I thought, okay, love traveling, I'll just apply. So I did a 3-year degree, and this is in Montreal, and qualified to become a travel agent and things like that. And, you know, I traveled to the UK and worked in a very small airline where we did everything completely manual, right? Completely manual, manifests, manual writing out of tickets, you know, manual invoices to the travel agents and calculations in a big red book that we had for the ledger, you know, for commissions, etc. And it was an incredible experience, a little bit frustrating experience, but it opened my eyes to really poor process at the time. Not long after I then moved back to Canada, became a travel agent, worked in a travel agency that was open 24 hours a day. And I really had an affinity with the systems and how to use the systems and how to, you know, and understanding that. When I moved to Australia, I worked for a hotel company, which I also use the systems and understood the databases. And again, process improvement opportunities, because you developed the reservation in one system, got a printout, then had to telex or fax to the other people. I then joined Qantas, and at Qantas, I worked in, you know, back-end operations and ticketing, etc. And they were then going to upgrade their system, you know, and it was a good thing because it was, you know, aside from being green screen, but it didn't talk to anybody, right? So if you were booking, you know, your hotel for Fiji for 7 nights, you know, you had to book the airfare in the Qantas system, and then book, you know, the combination in another system for invoicing, and then send a fax off to the actual hotel. It was terrible. It was a conversation that was actually held, you know, from senior management with somebody else, and saying, oh yeah, we need a new system. Oh yeah, just got a system, why don't you use ours? And then they asked for volunteers for who wanted to help do the implementation and configuration. And one of the things my dad always told me was, you know, if somebody offers you an opportunity that will stretch you, take it, right? And I thought, okay, let me do something different here, and I'll learn more about from the IT side of things. So I worked on that, and, you know, did everything from configuration and developed the training manual and, you know, screen flows and all that type of thing. So that was actually quite exciting. And then when, you know, I have to go live, working in a help desk type of environment where you analyze if it was a defect or not a defect, or, you know, that type of thing. Further on into my career, I then worked in the customer relations team at Qantas, and they had a very archaic, they call it a complaint management system, but it was really the beginnings of a CRM. And I was, my role was to be the administrator of that system. So I actually had the system in a box that was just underneath my desk. And, you know, I had to connect through a WAN to get files from all over the world of complaints and compliments as such. Very, very tedious system. And, you know, they had to then go off and type up letters and standard letters, etc. So they were upgrading. So my job was initially just as the administrator, create new categories and things. And I really got to really understanding at that point the importance of relational databases and how data actually related between one entity to another entity. And, you know, gathering reporting requirements from, you know, cabin crew versus the engineering team versus the baggage team versus catering, et cetera. And everybody had different requirements. And it was one of the first requirements gathering that I actually had to do. and, doing mock-ups of different types of reports and things. And that's when online processing first started coming. So BI tools were first started coming into play. So this is the early 2000s. So use of, Cognos, et cetera, and things. So really starting to understand the data and the requirements and what information could be actually captured. I then moved on to the strategic systems component of Qantas and worked on their data warehouse, where we combine, all that information from catering, a number of passengers, what if scenarios. And for that was, it was great. It was really cool. We did, defection analysis. We did all sorts of different things that people weren't even asking because they didn't know the data was actually available. They didn't know how many people they were actually transporting. They didn't know how many, and then being able to work out how much the cost actually was for a delayed flight, et cetera. So that was some really cool stuff that I was able to do. I then went on maternity leave and left Qantas. When I came back from Qantas, I came back and was ready to go back to work, I was looking in Seek and going, what am I? I was called an administrator. I was called an analyst. I didn't know what I actually was. Right. And then I remember going and speaking to a couple of recruiters who helped me fix up my CV, but actually said, you're actually a business analyst. I'm going, oh, okay, there you go. There's something called business analyst. Didn't know that. And at that point in time, there was no IIBA. There was the Australian Institute of Business Analysis, AIBA, I think was there. But aside from that, there wasn't really any formal thing on structure and stuff like that for being a business analyst. When I came back from maternity leave, I actually got a job in New South Wales for what was called the Roads and Traffic Authority. And for that, I just learned the ropes. I had done some of the things before in terms of workshops and walkthroughs and analyzing data, but I really learned through the BA managers there and the team members and, our lunch and learns and things like that on what it is to do and from an approach perspective. And I think one of the things that I still carry on from those days is actually having a BA plan and planning out what I wanted to do and to achieve. So that's how I became a BA. So it wasn't something that I originally studied. It just sort of happened. I had some great opportunities offered to me and I just said yes. Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. I think even though you have started BA so early in the back, however, the work sounds pretty similar to these days, what we're doing now as a BA. So it's quite interesting to see how slowly kind of this job has been evolved. I guess my next question will also be relevant to this. So you have done so many years as a BA and a BA lead. What attracts you to stay in the BA world? And how do you keep yourself motivated for such a long time and not getting bored?
Well, I think working in teams and collaboration is just excellent, to keep you motivated. I love chats, and being able to have, a bit of fun on the chats and things like that with your colleagues. I was talking to somebody today, it's Tuesday and it's Tune Tuesday in her company, and they link their favorite tune and things. What attracts me to stay in the BA world, I guess, is that those outcomes that I talked about in the beginning. I love, providing really great outcomes. There's always something new, especially now with cyber becoming prominent for BA is really important. I think the switch from functional to non-functional and how we're going to define those. I think that's something that's really new and exciting. I think the whole data, storytelling, being empathetic to the end users and telling them a story that they actually understand from the data, and it's not just a graph. What does it actually mean? What are the actions that they can actually do for that? I did some of that at Australia Post a few years back, and it was it was really gratifying, you know, salespeople who are like, okay, well, these are just numbers, right? Like, this is how many sales I actually made, and this is how much actually is. But, you know, what's underneath when you start scratching that data and coming down, you know, the different layers and what stories is it actually telling you about various depots, various departments, you know, packaging, etc. It's quite exciting for that. I like that. I think each project is actually different because of the makeup of people. So that's really cool. And also the outcomes and the organization as well, whether or not it's a government organization or a not-for-profit organization. I worked for one not-for-profit here in Adelaide, and the project itself, it was not a commercial outcome. You know, it wasn't a commercial outcome. You know, it was purely for the residents who have been there for their entire lives, for making their lives better, right? And it was looking at, you know, catering options. It was looking at fixing their bank accounts, you know, and it was just like, yeah, and it's the same skills as whether or not you're that or you're looking at a CRM and the functional requirements, you know, for a large multinational. You know, so that's what I like about being a BA, and that's why I've stayed on. Yeah,
that's awesome. I think I do believe BA is a role that you can do for a really long time. As you said, it never ends, the projects and the changes, and also you can get approached to so many different new things and new technologies, which is quite fascinating. So that's why I guess many people are really interested in becoming a BA from their current roles. But however, I believe many people have the same questions that I will ask for the next, which is, what is your suggestion to people who want to become a BA, however, they don't have any direct experience or relevant degree like you maybe 20 years ago, and they're probably not in the position where they have the internal opportunities to transfer to a BA role. So what could they do to kind of achieve this transition into the BA?
I think there's multiple things that you can actually do, right? One, you know, and I'm not trying to push numbers for IIBA, but I think it's a very good organization, right? So in terms of joining your local chapter, really important, great for networking, great for introducing yourself to other people. Do the course, right? Do the BABOK course through the IIBA or through another training organization. Do the ECBA, right? The entry level one, and that's for people who are new to being a BA. And for me as a hiring manager, if I see somebody who doesn't have any experience but they've done that, to me that shows the commitment, because you have to actually write that test, right? It's not test, a multiple choice. So that's one thing. Use LinkedIn, use YouTube. There are so many things on YouTube at the moment on BAs that have been prepared by the IIBA or by other BAs as well. There are podcasts, you know, that, you know, fantastic podcasts on processes. Process Pioneers is one that I can highly recommend. So you learn everything about processes and start thinking like a BA, you know, and so what does a BA actually think of? When you go to Audi, I don't know if they've got Audi in New Zealand, and you actually see their sign as to why you have to put a coin in to get the trolley, and you see the steps or whatever, and going, well, that's not a really good process. What are they thinking about? You know, you know, that's not a process. That's a decision. You know, that's a benefit. What's that? You know, start thinking like a BA, and looking and exploring for opportunities within your current work. And if you can't find that in your current work, volunteer. Not necessarily volunteer for IIBA, but volunteer in, you know, your local charities. You know, a lot of people would be very happy to do that. I did a short stint at a very small charity in Sydney. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it was an Anglican-based organization that focused on missions or whatever. And I volunteered there and just gave some advice and reviewed their database and their customers and things like that. And I think one of the things, if you look at chapter 9 right, of the IIBA. That has got the fundamentals of the softer skills as such, the competencies that they're called. And for those, you need those in any professional organization. And if you can show those in an interview and through your CV, you're doing really well. Yeah.
Cool. I think they are really valuable suggestions. I hope you guys have already taken down the notes and tried to put into practice, because by learning is actually really by doing. You can't just learn a textbook and a series and becoming a BA. You need to do stuff. You need to get your hands dirty and get out there to do some projects. Yes. I 100% agree with that. I guess now you have been doing a lot of like BA management, you're hiring a lot of BAs. So what actually do you look for when you hire BAs from non-traditional backgrounds who might not be trained as a BA? Yeah. What attributes or qualities you look for?
So I guess I think my first hiring of a BA was like through graduates or whatever through New South Wales government. And then at Harvey Norman, we had opportunities. We created in the PMO for a couple of junior BAs. And for that, we opened that up internally. And we had some great applicants from the help desk. And I love the help desk guys because when they had degrees in, hardware or networking and things like that. So they understood IT, right? So they understood IT. But they also understood customer service because they were on the help desk, right? So for somebody who's got excellent customer service skills and communication skills and basic IT skills, because they've already they've been using, Zendesk or whatever tool, ServiceNow, whatever tool that they were using. So they understand databases. They understood problems, right? They understood what the outcome was supposed to be. They had the fundamentals of business analysis right there, right? So identifying what the problem is, try to replicate the problem, what are the potential solutions, communicating that, etc., gathering what the requirements actually were to actually resolve that, and then presenting that back, in whatever forum actually was. And for me, that was a really great learning experience because I got two guys from the same help desk. One guy was really gung-ho, really keen, always stayed back, wanted to learn everything, and, gave him, traceability matrix to start off with this major SAP implementation. And he just ran with it. And the other guy, who is also from the help desk and also from both of them were both immigrant. So one thing I think it was she was completely different. It was a very different attitude that he actually portrayed, and it was very combative, and the communication skills were just not there. So later, I'm still in contact with one of those guys, and he is now, a fantastic BA, has learned heaps. I've employed him on 2 other contracts, and it's wonderful to see where he's actually grown to that. Other people that I've hired, I've hired a salesperson as a BA, and also most recently for somebody who took orders for kitchens, right? So they had to know what the requirements were from the client and work with the builders and make sure, it was costed and invoiced and measured and everything like that. And she had provided some input as a SME into a CRM for the organization. And, and now she's just a brilliant BA because she had those basic skills. So what I look for is attitude, great communication skills, gung-ho, willing to learn, willing to do anything that needs to be done on the project, whether it's a traceability. What are some of the good podcasts? Process Pioneers. Look at the Process Pioneers. That's one of the better ones from processes because I love process. And, if you look, there's a BA doctor, there's a whole bunch of things out there as well. I am passionate about giving people a go, right? Because somebody gave me a go. And, having, migrated to Australia and things like that. And I know that there's differences and things. It's trying to fit into that client world, and somebody who can be malleable enough or what's the word? Not humane, but modest enough to know when to ask questions and not to assume and not to push back. So yeah, that's what I actually look for.
That's really awesome, because I also came from a non-traditional thing.
Yeah, big smiles. Like seriously, it makes the world a difference. During the pandemic and hiring people, and you're doing like this, that's what differentiated people, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree, because I personally came from the sales background. I 100% resonate with what you said. We already got the foundation of like good soft skills, communication, custom services, mindset. I think let's all make us a great to enter the BA world. So I really thank you for encouraging us from the different areas to try to just become a BA with the efforts that we want to put into. I guess last question from me is that you already touched on this. You mentioned about cyber, you mentioned about data, and right now the ChatGPT is actually kind of took the hit of the world. So how do you see the future of the BA career? Do you think it is still worthwhile to pursue?
Oh, definitely. I think definitely. That human interaction will always be required, you know what I mean? And, I still believe in GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out, right? So this chat AI, like somebody can feed it absolute rubbish, right? And you'll get rubbish back, right? So and when people say things in an interview or in a workshop or anything, it's not what they're really saying. And you need somebody in there who's got the emotional intelligence to actually scrape the surface on what the actual problem is or what the actual issues actually are, right? So, in a lot of companies and organizations, they have, very complex needs. A CRM, yes, a CRM can be a CRM, can be a CRM. And then there's, a little tweaks here and there, depending on what type of products and stuff like that. But depending on the complexity of what their problems actually are, I don't think that's something an AI can actually gather the requirements from, understand what the real underlying issues actually are, being able to link that to the objectives, being able to understand, from a user experience point of view. So I don't know if anybody has done UX, but having a really great service design so you understand what's happening for your customers, for your middle team who are actually servicing the customers, and the back office. That's not something I think in the short term AI will be able to replicate and presented back in a way that people can actually understand. And telling that story of the data, sure, they would be able to analyze the data and make it into a pretty graph or a pretty pie chart or whatever the case may be, but being able to tell that story, being able to summarize it in the language that the business actually understands. And that's one of the things that people as BAs need to understand, what the business language is, and you talk that back to them. I'm not too sure as to the levels of business language an AI can actually do. I think it's definitely worthwhile pursuing because there's so many different areas, some really exciting projects because of, climate change, because of new technology, new things, new roads, new communities. Uses. I think that's IoT. I think that's all incredibly fascinating, but you still need process beyond that, and you still need requirements to be gathered for all that to actually work.
Yeah, totally. I still think I'm also thinking like it is hard to replace BA in terms of like skip the human interactions and actually decision making that you need to analyze so many complex systems and information. So it's definitely a really great career that cannot be easily replaced by robots or AI.
I don't think it can. I
Go
don't
for
think
it.
it can. Yeah. As long as they replace the instant coffee with a really good coffee machine, that's the only robot I want to see in the office.
Yeah. Cool, awesome. I think let's wrap up for our prepared questions. Now we pass on to the Slido board to see what questions do our audience have. I see people already posted quite a few, and welcome to pop your questions. Continue doing that on the Slido board, and we will try our best to answer as much as possible. The most highly voted one is that, thank you for your time, Linda. What would be a good entry point for us? How can our application catch recruiters' attention without much experience in BA? Like, how can we get the interview, I guess, in the first place?
Yeah, I think, you know, just really upfront. Like, I mean, I see a lot of CVs that, you know, I don't, you know, you don't need to put your marital status. You know, you don't need to put your picture in there, you know, and things like that. What you need to do is you need to put a summary of what projects you worked on and what technology you've actually worked on, right? And even if it's only 3, you know, and what you actually contributed to that, right? So project name, you know, what industry it was actually in, you know, you did the traceability, you did some process flow diagrams, some UML, whatever the case may be, you know, it's delivered on time and on budget, right? And what technology was used, you know, it was this technology, that technology, whatever it is, right? A few of those, you're going to get people's attention, right? Because they know that you have some experience. If you haven't actually been involved in a project, but you have done some process work, right? If you worked on, you know, doing board reports, or you've been collating statistics, you know, there's a whole stream of activities and outcomes that a BA does other than writing user stories, right? So have a look at the IIBA book or on the website and see what they actually are and list those. List also your accomplishments, your personal accomplishments in terms of, you know, you're great at collaboration. You know, you have excellent, you know, programming or databases.
Cool. Thank you so much for that tips. I guess just listed those relevant tasks and projects that would be quite useful. Yeah. And the second one is, hi Linda, what bootcamp do you recommend for aspiring BAs to make the career transition more smoothly? Is there anything available in Australia? Can you think of?
What do you mean by boot camp? I'm just inquiring about that. Right. So are you saying it's like a course or something, or an intensive?
I guess
you don't have to go to the gym, although it's very important to be strong enough to deal with some nasty stakeholders. I can tell you that. Yeah. For, you know, I would recommend that you do a course, right? There's no denying that you actually have a certificate in, or, you know what I mean? And it shows a keenness, right? Especially if you paid for it yourself or whatever. If you can get your boss to pay for it, whatever, in your learning and development plan, you know, getting some certifications, getting an understanding of, there are things like the last conference, they have that coming up in March, I think it is, from the Agile world, if you're interested in Agile. Something that I would strongly recommend people to get their toes dipped in, to understand the roles of the BA in an Agile world, which is not specifically spelled out in the Agile Manifesto. You know, I would recommend, you know, the IIBA Festival of Business Analysis, which is coming up in October. You know, you'd get a great exposure to some great speakers and some hear some war stories, or, you know, some new techniques, you know, and skills. So yeah.
Cool. I hope that's what you meant by boot camp,
because I'm not too sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the boot
camps
camp
I
is
know are boxing.
sometimes, yeah, it's more probably for someone who want to become a web developer or a programmer, and then they would took like 3 months intensive study and doing some projects, that kind of stuff.
Right, yeah.
But I
Yeah.
don't think there is a BA bootcamp
No,
like that.
I don't think I haven't heard of one. There's a place here in Adelaide called 42, whatever, which is like that boot camp I'm talking about for coders to become a coder. We provided a number of free tickets to the Adelaide IIBA Festival of Business Analysis. And it was really, really great meeting these young people who are learning new skills and then understanding what that relationship was on getting the requirements to actually developing, right? So yeah, you can all know how to code, but you need to get the requirements and how you actually fit those in. Yeah.
Cool, awesome. All right, next one. What have you done as the chairperson to make the IIBA Adelaide branch so successful and attracted so many members?
Yeah, so for that one, is looking at the fundamentals, right? And the fundamentals are, what is the value the IIBA brings to its members, right? What are the fundamentals, right? Sure, they print a great book, they have a fantastic website, etc. But once you have the book, so what, right? It's networking, right? And it's to get a job, right? It's education. So that's the training courses. It's the events so they can learn and network, right? And it was just creating those events, right? Getting people in, getting somebody to talk about user stories in Moscow, getting somebody to do a lean coffee so people could understand some agile concepts, getting somebody to come in about business architecture, what is it, etc. Getting somebody to talk about the role of the product owner, etc. So it was a lot of, and we actually did a Slido. At first, we had a breakfast meeting with the IT management in Adelaide and asked them, what do you want your BAs to learn? Right. And they provided, and we did one of those word cloud things as a result, as they kept on putting things in, and that came out, right? Okay, they want to know about agile communication skills, etc. So we got somebody in from the Facilitators Association who came in and gave a presentation and things like that. So we just pushed that, and the numbers just rose. The numbers just rose because people were coming. We had the 10th birthday party, and we just had fun. We had the best cake and quizzes and prizes and thank yous and appreciation for sponsors and suppliers and people who gave their time and volunteers. So yeah, I think that was the key, was just get stuff done. Yeah, like which is what
awesome.
you do. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoy that kind of sense of community while like all BAs gather together to discuss things and learn from each other. That's also one of my vision, to create this meetup group as well. Hopefully we can do similar stuff in the future and connect to BAs closely and grow together. Yeah, next one is Linda. How do you balance work and family while working in BA? I guess your life is busy with all the stuff going on.
I mean, it's easier obviously as they're adults, but when they were kids and things like that, I worked in government purposely for a long period of time because my kids were young, and I knew that I could leave at 5:30 to pick them up from daycare, etc. As a BA, you have to work really close with your project manager and understanding estimates and providing estimates and prioritization, what's more important than other things. But one of the things that I've learned in the past 12 months, the importance is that work life balance. Hokum, done. I think really prioritizing your home life, as one of those big rocks, you know what I mean? And your clients and everything like that. That's just the sand that fills in the gaps. That just pays for your big rock, which is your family, and keeping that priority. And then, raising your hand if you need help. I learned that the hard way. So you just really need to be open with that. And if you're struggling, you need to talk about it, whether it's, a task or whether or not it's too much work or whatever the case may be. You just need to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important to get a safety net and support around you when you kind of struggle with your work or life. It's really important to just don't burn out yourself and sacrifice yourself to do too much. Cool. Next question is, hi Linda, outstanding share. Is domain knowledge matters for BA from your point of view? And if yes, is there any advice for picking in domain industry?
Yeah. I think, this has been a continuous debate since the dawn of time. It's chicken or egg, or domain or not domain for BAs, right? I think a really good BA who knows how to ask the right questions, and they have people to ask the questions to, that's a very important part, can work in any domain, in any type of project. That's my personal belief. I've seen it. I've done a lot of it, right? There have been very few projects that I've worked on, and that's including the e-chemotherapy prescribing system. I am not a chemist. I am not a pharmacist. I am not a nurse, etc. But I was able to gather the requirements and send that out to market without a medical degree, because I knew how to ask the right questions and worked on the processes, right? So I believe that that's the case. There will always be a minority of people who will say, you need to have banking experience, you need superannuation experience, you need mining experience. No, you don't, right? But yeah, that's my belief. I've proven it. I've had, guys on my team who have proven it as well. Because not every you're born into working into finance or born into one of my last places that I worked in. One of my guys was working at the casino, right? And it's like, well, no, he's never worked in, he's never been in the casino before, but he knew what to do, right? So it's the same. You apply the same principles, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I do think if you have some kind of domain knowledge, like you picked up from your work or your project, that will be quite useful for communicating with your stakeholders. Just don't hold your back to learning new things, but don't be daunted if you don't have these. So that's not a big issue, as Linda mentioned. Awesome. Next, I think this is upvoted. Hi, Linda. I wonder how necessary.
That's right. I'm not approve.
How necessary these points are. First one, IT knowledge without IT background. Number two, extra personality, and three, English proficiency for BA.
I think the biggest thing here is the English proficiency. You can be an introvert. I've had team members who are introverted, and nobody's always an extrovert. There are people who've got quiet days, and whether or not they got out of bed without a cup of tea day. Not having IT knowledge, I think, to me, is actually a benefit, right? Because then you're focusing on what the business requirements actually are. What are the business goals? What is the process? There are technology people who are going to be defining what system is going to be used, what table will be taken from, etc. If you need to have some IT knowledge for some acceptance criteria, I'd work perhaps with the product owner or the architect to say if they need to know what table to extract that from. But I really don't see it's needed. That's my opinion. If you're a functional consultant, different story, right? Got to remember that there's a defined thing. So if you're a functional consultant for Microsoft Office 365 or Dynamics or for Salesforce or something like that, that's a slightly different kettle of fish, because you need to understand the things about entities and stuff like that. But that again doesn't mean that you're not going to learn it when you've worked on a project. Yeah, and you build up that knowledge.
Yeah. Cool. The key thing is just to be a quick learner.
But I think I cannot stress enough the English proficiency, to be able to communicate in a written format well. Doesn't have to be War and Peace, but being able to write a concise, usable user story. It's really important being able to write professionally in an email. I've unfortunately had to let people go because they did not have that. and it made it very hard. You know, I've had some people whose accents are very, very strong. And with some coaching, and there's lots of things on YouTube again to help you with pronunciation, and you know, watching movies and reading English books, whatever, and that just helps so much.
Yeah, cool. And I also recommend you guys to try Toastmasters, because I personally grow a lot from participating in that kind of clubs, practicing the public speaking and writing the scripts and etc. So it's really useful. Highly recommend. Okay, I think this question was upvoted just now, which is, hi Linda, how do you work with data team and how you get your ideal data from them?
Right. Well, it depends, right? So I know that when I've worked with data teams, you know, you can go into great detail in helping them build a data model or whatever it is, and the ETL and cleansing it or whatever. I think your basic thing is you got to understand is what's the process, right? If you're talking about sales data, you need to understand what the sales process is. What are the stages, right? So if something has been identified as a potential lead, that's actually confirmed as a prospect, that's actually been converted, et cetera, what are the triggers of all of those, right? Well, when you actually understand what that process is, then you start understanding what data it actually is, right? So what's the trigger to actually change that event? How does it go between people? Once you start understanding the process, then you start understanding the data that is captured to support that process. And then when you want to extract that data, that would make sense for them, right? So, you know, are the sales teams divided by territory? Are they divided by account type, etc.? So it's understanding the data from a process point of view, and then what type of reports, what type of outcomes do they actually want? What decisions are there actually going to be? What's the purpose of these actual reports? It can be data for data's sake. You know, you could just, you know, send out a list or whatever. And it doesn't mean anything to a managing director or to the board. It needs to be summarized in a way that they actually understand it. Right. And when you're gathering the requirements, I really like to focus on two major things for when it comes to reports, which then leads to data, is what measures do they actually want? Right, what are you measuring? Are you measuring data? Are you measuring, you know, dollars? What quantities is it? Is it in kilograms? Is it weights? Whatever it actually is, actually understand what that is. And then if there's actually any calculations that actually need to be made for you to get the outcome, that's not going to be in the database. That would have to be actually calculated outside, but it's part of the report. And then you want to know the dimensions, right? So the dimensions are, you know, your time dimensions, right? Whether you want it down by week, whether you want it by month, you know, it could be by category. What are the dimensions that you actually want, or filters for another word, right? What are the things that you actually want it to be displayed as? If it was like, for example, a retail organization, e-commerce, you know, you might want it by which stores people are actually picking up from, you know, and you just need to understand what the processes are to then start getting what those dimensions and measures are. But you have to ask the clients.
That's very useful.
Working with the team is, you know, it's really quite simple. We just, you know, like sitting alongside them and start telling them what the customers actually want. Sometimes I do a mock-up. So actually understand what.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I guess in the end of the day, we still need to link the data back to the business and business goals, business purposes. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of data without anything like relevant.
Yeah.
Awesome. Next one is, I guess this is probably not, maybe you can't answer for New Zealand, I guess. So could you kindly share some advice for an experienced BA in China, but a newcomer, maybe, for example, in Australia or a foreign country to get the first BA job? Just how do we translate those past experience?
We have this happen all the time here. I think more from India than China for some reason. That's been my experience here in Adelaide anyway. And the thing is get to know people, right? Grab a coffee with a recruiter so they can put a face to a name, right? Really important. Attend those IIBA events if there are some, right? So get to know the people, and and even if you do a course or you volunteer through the IIBA, checking people in as they come in at the venue, whatever the case may be, you get to know people. So that certainly helps. Somehow or another, try to get some local experience. In Adelaide, it's quite colloquial. Sydney, not so much. I'm not too sure about New Zealand. You have to tell me about that. But I know here, it's really important that there's a local reference side. Make sure somebody locally has reviewed your CV. And I say this is true. When I was in Sydney and I got somebody's CV and they were a Kiwi, all right? Great project manager, absolutely fantastic experience. In their key interests and hobbies, she wrote down tramping, right? Now, in Australia and in the UK, tramping means something other than hiking, right? So you just need to make sure, sorry, it's my dogs. You need to make sure that what language you're actually using and terms actually is appropriate for that area, right? You also need to understand, like, for example, you might be working in Shanghai, which is English is almost the second business language. And for actually to say that, right? So I had somebody who was from Nairobi, right? And people weren't interviewing him because they thought that he spoke some type of, I don't know, African language that they weren't. And just put on your CV on your fluency of English. Now, if English is not your first language, put in what is it that there's a grading that you can actually get. I can't remember what the
IELTS.
Yes,
PTE, stuff like that. IELTS.
Yeah, that one. Yes, that's it. Yeah. Yeah. Put that
cool. Yeah, it's the same thing in New Zealand. Like, people really value local experience and local connections. So I definitely agree that you need to adapt your CVs or cover letter to local style. Like what kind of sections, language, wordings, how to describe your experience. That's all very important. Let's just make people connect with you really directly.
Yeah, I think one of the really important things is people don't understand the scope and the size of the companies that might be in China or India or UK or wherever, right? So some people in Australia and New Zealand might understand what Tesco is, right? But I wouldn't know what the major food chain is in China, right? Like grocery store. And if you were at that grocery store or the power company or the utility company, actually say that this is, India's, largest retail organization or whatever, right? So that people actually can then relate to, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, totally. Cool. Next question is, what was the aha moment in early stage of your career that made you realize being a big A was the pathway for you, like the trigger?
I think this is a retrospective aha. Right. So this was in terms when I was at Qantas, and this has happened multiple times, right? Is where people decide on solutions that cost multi-million dollars and multi-years of implementation without understanding what the business requirements actually are. And then I've been involved in the painful end of trying to put that square peg into the round hole, right? So, and that's happened a number of times, and realizing on the importance of that, whether or not it's, in Australia, when you want to go overseas, people, when they go to Asia, they'll spend 3 days in Seoul, they'll then spend 3 days in Hong Kong, they might spend then a week in Kuala Lumpur or something like that, somewhere on the beach somewhere, right? When you buy a system from the UK, in the UK people, when they go on holidays for 2 weeks, they'll spend 2 weeks in Ibiza, right, lying down on the beach. And those are two very different markets. And if you buy a system that's based on that 2 weeks lying down on a beach and the only thing you're doing is having a flight and a shuttle to your hotel, versus an Australian who likes going, doing a day tour here and going exploring there, and then, have a day free and then have a transfer by a boat up to, through the national park in Malaysia, the market and understanding what it is, because in the end it had to be scrapped, right? Because we couldn't in the end fit in all the things that the Australian market wanted to actually do.
Cool, very interesting experience on that. I think we are actually pretty much about the time. Do you have maybe another 5 minutes to pick up one or two questions, Linda?
Yeah,
cool,
sure.
Awesome. I think the last one has been answered, the certifications, etc. So maybe we can come down. I really think this one is valuable to kind of ask you, which is, how do you navigate like stakeholders' conflicts and stay on track with gathering information and requirements? How to resolve the conflicts?
Yeah, I think it's really depending on, when I go into a workshop or send out a workshop notification, I have, a understanding what the objective of the workshop is, right? What the expected outcome is, but also have what the expected outcome is for the project, right? So if it is, for instance, you need to have a new telephony system, right? And you want it to be like Joe Blow's telephony system, right? And you have to find out, okay, well, why do you want it to be like Joe's, right? Why not have this wonderful thing that you already have? Like, do you even realize what you already have, right? It's basically people understanding what is the objective. What are they going to be using it for? And sometimes it's not in the actual session itself. You have those conversations. You say, okay, well, let's park that, right? You want it to be a blue telephone and you want it to be a red telephone. Let's talk about this outside and say, okay, well, what's the benefits of it being blue? What's the benefits of being red? Does it actually meet the actual objective of the actual of the project? And people get bogged down into their own preferences and things that they feel very emotional about, and because it becomes their life, and that's hard sometimes to get people to divorce that and just keep it simple back to what the objective of the actual project is. And if it's beyond that, well, that's when you talk to your project manager or you talk to your scrum master and things like that, and they'll help you with, dealing with that. One of the things I do say, though, and I've said this many times, is that you have to be careful with stakeholders. They feel they've got a lot of power over you, but you are still a person, and they still have to respect that you're a person. And if it's not going down well and they're getting emotional and heated and things like that, just very politely excuse yourself and say, and it's happened to me numerous occasions where you just say, okay, let's just take this back to my sponsor or whatever, that we weren't able to come to any decision. And people will then respond to that.
Yeah, I guess in the end of the day, we just need to step back a little bit and understand their motivations and what they're really after. Then we can resolve the conflicts accordingly. I guess another question here would be interesting to know is, what is the biggest challenge for you to experience the transition from tourism industry into a BA? What kind of challenges have you encountered?
Yeah, I think in terms of when I moved from Qantas and I went to a government agency, and understanding, like, for example, I knew, like, I was a SME, right? Because I had a degree in tourism. I actually understood, I've been a traveler, I'd lost bags. I've never asked for a special meal, but but you understood what the process was, right? So I understood it. I think it's when you go into any other industry as a BA, you then sort of need to start back to square one. So it's like you don't know anything. So you don't make those assumptions, right? So that's the key there, right? And it's going back to understanding what the requirements actually are, what's the purpose, what's the strategic intent of what you're actually doing. So getting away from your comfort zone of, yes, I knew the tourism industry really well, to going into the transport and road, which I knew nothing about, but I was able to ask the right questions of the subject matter experts. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Maybe one last question is when it comes to the responsibilities of BA, how would you weight process optimization and illicit requirements? What's the proportion of those work?
Well, it really depends, right? Like for me, if you elicit a requirement that maintains a bad process, well, there's no point, right? So you have to look at, you need to have a process, right? Even if it's a bad process, it's good to have a process, and it's better if it's written down, right? You can elicit requirements from your current state to your future state. Now, some projects don't have the scope of that. And it's something you really need to talk to the project manager about, who needs to escalate it to the board or, the steering committee to say whether or not to have that in scope. And 99 times out of 100, they'll say, yeah, the process is crap and we need to improve it. And there's no point putting in a new system. You're just going to be so I think it actually be really, really valuable. And sometimes it doesn't require automation. I've worked on projects where we're able to reduce the turnaround by 25% on applications that had nothing to do with any technology, right? It was just a way how somebody actually handled the information. So those are the types of things people are actually keen, and that really shows the value of a BA.
Cool. Awesome. I think most of the time, the requirements will actually include the business process mapping and maybe improvements sometimes. So it's quite hard to tell the proportion of these two things. Sometimes it's mingled together. I think that's about it. It's already 9:10. Thank you so much, Linda, for your time and sharing such valuable insights and stories with us. And I think that's really encouraging for most of our aspiring BAs. Like, we can actually do this from a different background other than the BA. And also thank you for all you all to participate in this event. If you are happy with us and want to refer to your friends or colleagues, please feel free to do so. We want to grow our community together. And please make sure you upload your notes if you have taken any to our shared Google Sheet. So our co-organizer will put the link into the chat box, and make sure you save it and upload some notes so that we can learn together and progress together. Also, we will upload the recordings to our BA Career YouTube channel, and welcome to subscribe to become the initial subscribers. I also hope to see you guys to join us in our next event, which is in about 2 weeks' time, on 14th of February in the lunchtime, which we will introduce the Salesforce to you guys by Amber Joseph. She is the founder of Nextwork, dedicating in teaching cloud technologies. So welcome you guys to learn a bit more about the technologies. And these are the QR code that you can scan to kind of get access to our Meetup group and YouTube channel. And again, thank you so much for Linda and everyone's time. And I hope you have a lovely night. See you next time. Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Look forward to see you next session. Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.